There's a best-selling book that's been a real hit on YouTube in the self-development genre. It's well written and the research is interesting, goes to all parts of the globe and canvasses a lot of worldviews and religion. It looks smart and savvy and it all makes sense. My problem with it is I don't think it was written for your life. And I think when you read the book, you just end up feeling guilty and like you're not working hard enough. The book is called The Comfort Crisis. It's by Michael Easter, and this is my pushback.
Easter is a well-regarded journalist and author, in part because he comes from a world of privilege. One of his first experts that he interviews is a Harvard-educated sports physician. So he describes a world with minimal friction, with 72 degrees temperature controlled environment at both work and home. He described having little friction, little fear, a life that's smooth and somewhat boring. But that's not the case for most people. People do experience friction between work and home. Home might not be affordable and the lease could end at any time. Any time. People relying on us can be almost unending. The workplace might not be able to give a couple of weeks off a year, as is part of Easter's prescription. Easter creates a straw man, I think, out of a frictionless, comfortable life. But I don't think that's the world of most people. So when he goes to knock it down and prescribed a solution, that's not something that's the fit for most of us. The comfort crisis, he talks specifically about this group in Tanzania. He talks specifically about this group in Tanzania who live very close to what our ancestors may have lived, needing to hunt and gather to a high level of physical exertion over 2 hours a day. And he used that to contrast our comfortable lives. I'd actually read a book called Exercised by Daniel Lieberman, who takes a lot more time to explore this group and what it means for our evolutionary biology. In Lieberman's work, he talks about the contrast in routines with the Hadza people to ourselves, to include the reality that the Hadza actually have a lot more time in their day, in their routine, to sit around and be lazy, as we might see it, to tell stories and jokes, to rest, to just be in community with one another. So I think while Easter hasn't misquoted the 2 hours per day of physical exertion, again, it kind of builds up a picture that doesn't tell the full story of the complexity of humanity. In Lieberman's book, he tells the story of complexity. According to Lieberman, we have evolved to be people who need to move each and every day, but he doesn't necessarily prescribe intense, life-threatening fits of activity just because this is practiced by the Hadza. I approach this next critique with some care. Easter's own personal discovery is actually really important. For him, early in the book, he explains that he was drinking too much. He looked forward to drinking and it really dominated his life. When he stopped the drinking for the sake of his health and well-being, what he was left with was not so much health, although that improved, but also boredom, lifelessness, something that was missing. And so these physical acts of challenge, misogyny, and just other opportunities to put physical friction in his life helped to fill up a space that was missing. But that's not everyone's story. Not everyone is bored. Not everyone has a gap or a lack of meaning. In fact, for so many people, their lives are too full, have too much pieces of friction, or so many opportunities for meaning and purpose that they're trying to get after that they don't all quite fit. One of the challenges of a book that sells a solution is that it can inadvertently look like it's solving everyone's problem when this might not be your problem. So after I've critiqued, that's a kind way of saying criticize all of these points, you might be wondering if I think that the book has anything worth offering. I think it does. I think it has a gem of an idea that's worth understanding, but it needs to be applied differently for everyone. I think Easter's insight of misogyny, that we can do difficult things in order to grow and not put it on social media in the process, is a really good thing. I think it's worth keeping. But I think narrowing this to a physical challenge for a limited time period misses the right prescription for most people. We can look broader and think about, where does this fit into my life? And how can this fit into the everyday rhythms of my life, rather than being confined to a single event at a time?
So let's think about the things, range of areas, and not just a physical challenge. But sure, let's start there. I don't think you need to start with a triathlon. I think for a lot of people, the time and commitment involved, the amount of step up on them physically, and perhaps even the risk that comes with that, is unhelpful. But we can always think carefully about where we are and if there's an area we can grow. If you're a woman, maybe you need to work on becoming stronger rather than simply focusing on cardio. It's uncomfortable. It requires perhaps learning about an area of fitness and accessing an area of fitness that's generally male dominated, but it's important for our strength and well-being. There's plenty of other opportunities to grow in our physical involvement, whether it be through or just working out. And they can be things that are not measured, they're not against anyone else, but they help us to become healthier and also test something of our mettle and our perseverance. But I think it's really important to not think of accomplishment and growth as simply a physical area of endeavour. That is far too limited. One of the things that stretches us the most, I think, is our relationship. There's been a real trend to think about cutting out toxic relationships out of your life. I think there's certainly some wisdom in being careful with the boundaries that you have, particularly around people who might hurt you or have hurt you. But one of the most important things we can do for our own growth is to continue to be in constructive relationships in the workplace, in the community setting, and even in our family with people for whom are a challenge for us. That helps us to grow in our patience and our understanding and empathy, particularly if that effort is not reciprocated. We could think about our growth intellectually. When we're not being graded on something for an assessment, it can be easy to sort of check out and do the minimum required. But the growth involved in reading a heavy book, a book that's not in our usual genre of understanding or interest, can be just as much of a stretch, if not more, than a physical endeavour. So it's worth thinking about what's an avenue of interest or that you haven't exposed yourself before, where you could grow in your knowledge and your understanding. And for me, I find spiritual growth, which can come in practicing spiritual disciplines or practices that I haven't really done much in before, can be a real place of testing. Kind of feels embarrassing and awkward to try a different style of prayer or meditation or worship. These things can be important for our growth and can help us unlock something of ourselves that we didn't know was there. So Easter's idea of challenging ourselves for personal growth, a great one. But I don't think we need to travel or take weeks off our jobs that might not allow us to do so. But rather we can look for opportunities for personal growth in our everyday lives. So I think the book, The Comfort Crisis, does have something to say, but I doubt it's saying something to you. I think the opportunities for growth might be more well-rounded and closer to home. If this has resonated with you, then one of my other videos on Sanctuary Corner might be worth having a look at. Thanks for watching. I'm Karen, and this has been Sanctuary Corner.